If you're one of the millions of men out there who believe that women are confusing or difficult to understand, I want you to pause for a second, because what I'm about to share with you is going to completely change the way you look at this. By the time we're done, you're going to realize that women aren't hard at all. Not when you truly understand how attraction works at its core. In fact, once this clicks for you, navigating your interactions with women is going to feel natural, almost effortless for the rest of your life. So let's get into it. To really understand this, we need to look back, far back, to ancient Athens. If you've ever seen the statues of the gods from that time, you'll notice they weren't designed to look friendly, soft, or approachable. They weren't sculpted to win the approval of everyone who walked by. Instead, they were bold. They were unapologetic. They carried intensity and presence. Take a look at Poseidon, captured in mid-swing, holding a massive trident, frozen in a moment of sheer power and purpose. Look at Apollo, carved with this unshakable confidence in his stare, almost as if he already knew he was right, as if he didn't care whether anyone else agreed or not. These statues were never created to be universally liked. That was never the point. They weren't meant to blend in or be easily digestible to the masses. They were carved to stand for something. Power, beauty, chaos, light, strength. They embodied specific traits, sometimes even polarizing ones, and that's precisely what made them unforgettable. And this isn't just about ancient mythology or stone statues. This is a deeper truth about human nature. The gods weren't trying to please everyone, and because of that, they stood out. They made people feel something. They left an impression. Love them or hate them, they were impossible to ignore. And believe it or not, this same principle applies to you and your interactions with women. The moment you stop trying to blend in, the moment you stop watering yourself down just to be liked by everyone, you naturally become more magnetic. And just like those statues, you stop being forgettable and start being unforgettable. And you see this exact same pattern show up across cultures, across history. It's universal. Take Norse mythology, for example. Look at Odin. He wasn't designed to be a crowd pleaser. He wasn't the smiling, charming, make everyone happy type of god. Not even close. Odin was dark. He was complex. He was unpredictable. He was driven by an obsession with knowledge and wisdom, not with popularity or approval. In fact, the most famous story about Odin is that he sacrificed his own eye, not to gain favor with people, but to gain wisdom, to understand more, to see deeper. And because of that, people didn't always like him, but they feared him, they respected him, they followed him. He left an undeniable mark, and whether people loved him or hated him, they couldn't ignore him, and that was entirely the point. You see the same thing when you look at leadership across human history. Even in tribal Africa, leaders weren't chosen because they were the most agreeable person in the group. They weren't picked because they pandered to everyone's feelings or opinions. They were chosen because they had presence. Because when they walked into a room or into a gathering, people felt something. They carried weight with their words. They had a sense of purpose, of direction. They stood for things, real things, even when those things weren't popular or universally agreed upon. And that contrast, that refusal to dilute themselves to be liked by everyone, is exactly what made people respect them. It's what made people feel something around them, and that, in itself, is what drew others in. Centuries later, psychology caught up to what history had been showing us all along. The famous psychologist Carl Jung put it perfectly when he said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Not the version of yourself that others expect. Not the version that gets the most applause. Not the version that pleases the most people, but the version that reflects your truest, boldest self. That, becoming who you truly are, is the real privilege." And when you understand that, everything, especially your success with women, starts to change. Quick break. Close your eyes for a second. Picture her, the girl you've always wanted. Feel what it would be like to actually have her. Now open your eyes, because here's the truth. Right now, you're invisible to her. You're getting outcompeted by guys with more money, better looks, higher status, and stronger game. You're playing a rigged game, and you're losing, but I've spent the last 35 years mastering this, studying, testing, and finally finding the secrets to get the girls I always wanted. You want to stop getting ignored? You want her chasing you? Then you need to wake up and act. Click the link in the comments if you are truly committed and take the first step toward becoming that guy. Few spots left. Be fast or miss out your last chance to make her yours. Let's get back to it. The truth is, most men, and I'm talking about probably 90% of guys out there, fall into the same trap, especially when they're around women. They dilute themselves, they water themselves down, they smooth out all the edges of their personality, their opinions, their quirks, all in an effort to be liked, to be accepted, to be validated. And here's the harsh reality most guys never figure out. The moment you do that, the moment you start editing yourself to win approval, you lose the very thing that makes you attractive in the first place. You strip away the one quality that actually makes you magnetic to women, because attraction isn't about fitting in. It's about standing out. It's about being bold enough to be you, unapologetically. And what's fascinating is that modern psychology has already confirmed this. There's a concept known as self-differentiation, and it's considered one of the most powerful predictors of genuine attraction. What does that mean? Self-differentiation is your ability to hold onto your identity, your values, your beliefs, your quirks, your unique edges, even when the people around you, including women, don't necessarily agree with them. It's the ability to stay rooted in who you are, even under social pressure. And when you can do that, when you can hold that frame, especially in the presence of women, it changes everything. Because what happens is you send a signal that's impossible to fake. You show that your sense of self isn't fragile. You don't bend or reshape yourself for approval. You're grounded, you're confident, you're real. And in a world where most men crumble under the weight of wanting to be liked, that kind of authenticity, it stands out, it captivates, it draws women in, and that, more than looks, more than status, more than anything else, is one of the most powerful forces that makes attraction effortless. But here's where things really start to click. When you're able to hold on to your true sense of self, especially around women, something powerful happens. You create polarity. And polarity, simply put, is the foundation of all real attraction. It's the natural tension, the push and pull, that makes relationships exciting, dynamic, and magnetic. Without polarity, there's no spark, there's no chemistry. But when you refuse to compromise your identity, when you stand firm in who you are and how you see the world, you create that spark effortlessly. Here's the key. When you stand firm in your identity, it doesn't make you universally liked. And that's exactly the point. It draws in the right people, the ones who resonate with your energy, your mindset, your presence, and at the same time, it naturally repels the ones who don't. And that's not just okay, that's necessary. Because real attraction isn't about appealing to everyone. It's about being so grounded in yourself that the right people can't help but be drawn in, while the wrong people simply fade away. Look at the men who have the strongest personalities. The guys who truly know who they are and refuse to let other people, especially women, alter or shake that identity. Those are the guys who stand out. But here's the truth. A lot of people don't like to admit, those men are often hated by others. Not everyone celebrates them. And more specifically, they tend to be hated by other men who lack that same level of identity, that same inner strength. It's the same dynamic you see with confident people in general. The ones who radiate self-assurance, the ones who carry themselves with quiet or even loud confidence, they naturally make insecure people uncomfortable. Why? Because they highlight what others lack. But that discomfort, that polarization, that's exactly what makes them unforgettable. It's exactly what makes them magnetic. And it's exactly what makes them successful. Not just with women, but in every area of life. So, when you really break it down, here's what it all means. The men who consistently attract women, the guys who naturally stand out, the ones women notice, remember, and feel drawn to, they all have one thing in common: a strong, unshakable personality. But here's the important part, that strong personality isn't something they fake. It's not some act they put on. It comes from one simple, powerful truth. They know exactly who they are, and they refuse to compromise that for anyone. They've accepted something most men never do. They understand that not everyone is going to like them, and instead of being afraid of that, they lean into it. They embrace it, because they know that polarity, that sharp contrast between the people who love them and the people who can't stand them, is exactly what makes them memorable, exactly what makes them magnetic. And science backs this up. If you look at neuroscience, you'll find that our brains are wired to pay attention to things that stand out, things that don't blend in, that violate expectations, that break the mold. When that happens, when we come across something or someone that defies our assumptions, our brain releases dopamine, the chemical that fuels attention, focus, even desire. It's our mind's way of saying, hold on, that was different. Pay attention to that. That's exactly what happens when a woman meets a man with a strong sense of identity, someone who doesn't play by the typical social scripts, someone who stands firmly in who he is, flaws, edges, quirks, and all. He doesn't blend in, he doesn't fade into the background. Her mind registers him as different, as memorable, and often as incredibly attractive. This is exactly what plays out when a woman crosses paths with a man who has a rock-solid sense of self, a man who knows who he is and owns it completely. It's almost instinctual. She sees him, and within moments, her mind registers that he doesn't blend in with the rest. He isn't like the other guys tiptoeing around, trying to be agreeable, trying to be liked. No, he has edges, he has bold opinions, he carries himself with a kind of unique energy that sets him apart, and whether she consciously realizes it or not, her brain reacts. Her mind fires off dopamine, the chemical that makes us focus, pay attention, and get curious. Suddenly, this guy is no longer just another face in the crowd. Her subconscious is practically shouting, hold on a second, this guy's different. Pay attention to him, remember him, and more often than not, that same instinctive reaction sparks attraction, because what's rare, what's bold, what stands apart is always magnetic. And this right here explains why the small percentage of men, the so-called 10% who seem to effortlessly get women, consistently stand out. It's not luck, it's not looks alone, it's not about cheesy pickup lines. It's because they've embraced who they truly are, unapologetically. They've sharpened their edges, they've leaned into their quirks, and they've accepted that being truly themselves means being polarizing. They know some people will dislike them, some will even hate them, but many others, especially women, will be drawn to them like a magnet, loved or hated, but never ignored. That's the reality for the men who actually get women. Meanwhile, let's talk about the guys who don't get women, the ones who fly under the radar, the so-called average Joes. If you take a closer look at these men, you'll notice a common pattern. They are the ones constantly trying to please everyone. They soften every rough edge, they hide their opinions, they dilute their personalities, all in the desperate hope of avoiding friction, avoiding conflict, avoiding rejection. And what happens? They become invisible. You've seen it play out in real life, probably more times than you can count. The guy who bends over backward to be liked by everyone, and as a result, no one really notices him. No woman feels drawn to him because there's nothing to latch onto, no sharp edges, no energy that sets him apart. Now, contrast that with the guy who is effortlessly himself. The guy who's bold, maybe a little weird, maybe he cracks jokes that make some people laugh and others roll their eyes. But the key difference? He owns it. He wears his quirks like armor. He doesn't shrink himself to fit into a box, and somehow that makes people respect him. That makes women attracted to him. Not because he's trying to impress them, but because he feels real. And in today's world, a world overflowing with filters, fakeness, and people terrified of being judged, being real is one of the rarest, most magnetic traits a man can have. Even evolutionary psychology backs this up. Throughout history, especially in tribal societies, the man who stood out, the man who confidently held his frame, who embraced his uniqueness, was either seen as a leader, a threat, or a genius. The men who blended in too much, they were forgettable, just another face in the crowd, easy to ignore, easy to forget. It's always been this way, even going back to tribal times. The man who stood out the most was the one who held his own frame. He was the man people either saw as a leader, a threat, or sometimes even a genius. But the men who blended in too much, the ones who watered down every part of themselves just to be accepted, those guys were forgotten. Just another face in the crowd, easy to ignore, easy to overlook. And this principle doesn't just apply to people, it applies to brands, to businesses, to literally anything that makes an impact. Look at Apple, for example. When the first Apple computers came out, they weren't for everyone. The same goes for the iPhone. It wasn't designed to please the masses at first. It was designed for a specific type of person. The innovators, the creatives, the rebels, and because of that, it exploded. Think about Harley-Davidson. Those motorcycles weren't built to appeal to every single person on the street. They stood for freedom, rebellion, and a certain rough, rugged lifestyle. Not everyone liked that, but the people who did, they became loyal for life. Or take Tesla. When Teslas first hit the road, they weren't for everybody either. They were polarizing, but they stood for something. Innovation, sustainability, bold design, and because they weren't trying to be liked by everyone, they ended up becoming iconic. And the exact same principle applies to men, especially when it comes to women. Here's the truth. The men who try to appeal to the masses, the men who desperately seek universal approval, are the ones forgotten by the masses, especially by women. But the men who unapologetically own who they are, the men who understand they are not for everyone, and that's perfectly fine, those are the men who stand out. Those are the men women notice. Those are the men women chase. The top 10% of men, the ones who effortlessly attract women, they all know a simple truth that most men never figure out. They know they're not for everyone, and they lean into that. They don't waste time trying to be universally liked. They don't water themselves down to avoid criticism. Instead, they double down on who they are, their quirks, their edges, their bold opinions, even the parts of themselves that some people might not like, and that's exactly why they stand out. If you want to massively increase your attractiveness, if you want your results with women to go from average to extraordinary, it starts with that same understanding. You need to know who you are. You need to have a strong, unapologetic sense of self. But it doesn't stop there. Once you've tapped into your real personality, once you've unlocked and embraced the strongest, most authentic version of yourself, you have to own the fact that not everyone's going to like you. And that's not a flaw, that's the feature. The men who succeed with women, and with life in general, understand this at a deep level. They realize that their personality isn't meant to be universally accepted. Some people will dislike them, some people will talk behind their backs, but at the same time, the right people, the women who are drawn to their energy, their authenticity, their confidence, will be pulled in like magnets. Meanwhile, average men, the ones constantly trying to please everyone, they never show their true selves. They round off every edge. They filter every word. They suppress every weird, bold, or interesting part of their personality out of fear that someone might disapprove. And as a result, they disappear into the background. They blend in, and they're forgotten. But the man who isn't afraid to be polarizing, he's never forgotten. What separates the 10% of men who effortlessly attract women from the 90% who struggle comes down to one simple but powerful truth. They fully accept that when they show up as their real, authentic, unfiltered selves, not everyone is going to like them, and they are completely okay with that. In fact, they expect it, and they lean into it. See, when you truly express your personality, when you let your opinions, quirks, confidence, and energy show, your personality naturally becomes strong, and strong personalities create polarization. It's inevitable. Some women will be drawn to you, some women will be turned off, some might even be repulsed by you. That's reality. But here's the part most men never understand. That's exactly what makes you unforgettable. The men who get all the women, they don't waste a second trying to be universally liked. They're not bending over backwards trying to be palatable to everyone. Instead, they've taken the time to understand who they truly are. They've accepted it, and they project it unapologetically. They know some people are going to love them, some people are going to hate them, but they will never be ignored. And here's where it gets interesting. The women who do find you attractive when you're being your true, unfiltered self, they won't just find you a little attractive, they will be ridiculously, overwhelmingly attracted to you. The chemistry is real, the connection is real, the desire is real, because you're showing them the most raw, confident, magnetic version of yourself. And for the women who resonate with that, it's irresistible. On the flip side, the guys who stay stuck, the guys who feel invisible to women, they all make the same mistake. They try to be for everyone. They water themselves down. They hide their opinions. They suppress their quirks. They play small to avoid rejection, and in the process, they make themselves forgettable. So the formula is simple. Know who you are. Own it completely. Understand that some people, including some women, will reject you, dislike you, even avoid you. But the ones who do like you, they'll be drawn to you in a way that's powerful, natural, and real. That's the only game worth playing. When you embrace that, when you stop diluting yourself to be liked by everyone, your entire experience with women and with life transforms. With that said, I hope this gave you some clarity. If you actually live by this, your results with women won't just improve, they'll skyrocket. Thanks so much for watching. I appreciate you being here. If this message spoke to you or gave you something to think about, do me a favor. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new drop. I've got more real talk, more growth, and more power coming your way. So stay locked in. And if you're going through something right now, just remember, your silence can say more than 1,000 words ever could. Take care of yourself, keep rising, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.